The day my granddaughter told me, "You can't stop us taking the estate," something inside me turned to stone. I remember her voice, confident, sharp, dripping with arrogance. She stood in my late husband's study, the one room she used to beg to enter as a little girl. Now she stood there like she owned it, and perhaps in her mind she did. If you love justice stories, like and subscribe, and tell me where you are watching from. Because this, my dear listener, is not just a story of betrayal. It is a story of how an old woman, who everyone thought was weak, became the architect of her family's downfall. My name is Evelyn Carter. I am 78 years old, widowed for 8 years, and the owner of a countryside estate my husband and I built from dust. We called it Maplebridge Manor, after the 2 maple trees that grew entwined near the old stone bridge at the entrance. For 50 years, that house was my life. The laughter of children, the smell of Sunday roast, my husband's old jazz records spinning in the evenings. It was more than property. It was a memory. And yet, to my family, it became something else, a target. My son, Daniel, had always been easily influenced. He married a woman who loved money more than warmth, and together they raised Chloe, my only grandchild. At first, she was my light, curious, clever, always sitting by my sewing table asking stories about the old days. But when her parents' investments failed, their affection for me changed into something hungrier. It began subtly. "Mother, you really should not be living alone in such a big place," Daniel said one afternoon over tea. "Oh, nonsense," I smiled. "The house keeps me company," Chloe added sweetly. "You could move into the city, Grandma. We'd take care of everything for you." Her words sounded caring, but her eyes were scanning the walls, the furniture, the framed deeds. I noticed it. I notice everything. After my husband died, I had a lawyer, Mr. Hale, help me update my will. It was simple. The estate would be divided fairly, a share to my son, and a portion set aside for the local orphanage I'd supported for decades. But as years passed, I saw greed creep in like rot. Daniel began hinting about family trusts and streamlining assets. Chloe, now studying business law, started dropping legal terms at dinner like she was testing my ignorance. I let them. You see, there's a strange advantage to growing old. People start assuming you're naive. One evening, I overheard Daniel whispering in the kitchen. "She won't even know what she's signing. We'll make it look like a power of attorney." Chloe's voice was calm, assured. "Once that's done, the estate's in our hands. You just have to keep her calm till then." My teacup trembled in my hand, but I didn't interrupt. I simply walked back to my room and closed the door quietly. They thought they were planning. But that night, so was I. In the following days, I played my role. I nodded through their suggestions, let Chloe help with paperwork, even let her bring her friend, a junior lawyer, to review documents for my safety. All the while, Mr. Hale and I worked behind the scenes. We created a mirror will, identical to the one they thought they were manipulating, except for one hidden clause. Any beneficiary found to have influenced or coerced the testator shall forfeit all inheritance, and the entire estate shall be transferred to the Maplebridge Children's Trust. And there was more, a video recording, time-stamped and witnessed, sealed in the bank's safe. I did not know exactly when they would strike, but I knew it was coming. Every smile from Chloe grew more brittle. Every visit from Daniel came with new documents. And then one autumn morning, my bank card was declined at the grocer's. I knew in that moment the betrayal had begun. What had they taken from me? And how far would they go to erase me from my own home? When the cashier told me my card was declined, I laughed softly. "There must be some mistake," I said, handing it over again. But the same message blinked red, insufficient funds. I knew at once this was not a banking error. It was a warning. I returned to Maplebridge Manor in silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the garden, the same garden where Chloe used to chase butterflies in her white summer dress. Funny, how memories fade faster than greed. Inside, Daniel was already waiting, pretending to be surprised to see me home early. "Mother, you look pale. Everything is all right." I looked at him, my son, my own flesh and blood, and in that instant I saw not concern but calculation. "Daniel," I said slowly, "the bank says my accounts are empty." He cleared his throat. "Ah, yes, about that. There's been some restructuring. You remember the documents you signed last month? It's all part of consolidating assets for easier management." Chloe entered just then, tapping away on her phone. "It's more efficient this way, Grandma. You've been under a lot of stress handling finances." "Stress," I repeated. "That must be why the house title now bears your father's name?" The air turned heavy. Chloe hesitated for a fraction of a second, then smiled. "You always taught me that family shares everything. I met her gaze. Calmly. Coldly. Everything except integrity. That night, I sat by the fire and reread the so-called power of attorney document they had tricked me into signing. It was elegant, deceptively so, transferring all legal and financial control of the estate to Daniel for management purposes. What they did not realize was that the real will, the one sealed with Mr. Hale, remained untouched. Still, I needed to know how deep the betrayal ran. The next day, I called the family lawyer directly. Mr. Jennings, I said, I would like to review the estate papers. There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. Mrs. Carter, I'm afraid I no longer handle your account. Your son informed us that you've stepped back from legal decisions. My hand trembled around the receiver. Stepped back? Yes, ma'am. Your granddaughter is the acting legal representative of the estate. That was the moment my heart broke, not because of the money, but because the girl who once braided my hair and called me her best friend had erased me from my own life. That evening I confronted them both. They were in the drawing room, sipping wine like victors. Chloe, I said softly, tell me what you've done. She didn't even flinch. I've done what's best for everyone, Grandma. You're old, forgetful. This way you can rest. Rest? My voice cracked. You've stolen what your grandfather and I built. Daniel raised his hands. Mother, please. You're being dramatic. We didn't steal anything. We're simply securing the future. You'll still live here, until you know it's time. Until it's time, I repeated. And what happens then? Chloe smiled. That same chilling, perfect smile. Then the estate passes to us. Naturally. The arrogance in her tone was like a slap. I turned toward the old portrait of my husband above the fireplace. Do you hear that, love? I whispered. Our blood has turned to strangers. That night, I packed a small bag, not because I was leaving, but because I wanted them to think I might. Let them feel safe, relaxed. At dawn, I went into town and met Mr. Hale, the only man I truly trusted. He was waiting in his modest office, spectacles perched low on his nose. I assume it's begun, he asked quietly. Yes, I said. They've taken control of my accounts and property titles. But not the will. He smiled faintly. Then it's time to activate the clause. I nodded. But not yet. Let them celebrate a little longer. The higher they rise, the harder they'll fall. When I returned home that evening, the locks had been changed. The gardener, Tom, looked at me nervously through the gate. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, he whispered. They said you'd moved into assisted living. My breath caught in my chest. I stood outside the iron gate of my own home, staring up at the windows glowing with warm light. The same house I had scrubbed, loved, and filled with laughter for half a century. And now I wasn't even allowed inside. I didn't cry. Not once. Because I knew something they didn't. I had left a trail they would never see coming. What secret did Evelyn leave hidden inside the estate? One that could turn the entire family's greed into their undoing. I stood outside the iron gate while the maple leaves scraped along the drive like little red hands. The wind carried the smell of lemon oil from the wood floors inside, a scent I knew because I polished those boards for decades. I pressed the bell. No answer. I pressed it again, and again the house refused me. So I slipped my hand through the bars and tugged a rusted latch Tom always forgot to fix. The side gate yielded with a soft click. Mrs. Carter? Tom whispered from the hydrangeas. His cap was in his hands like a prayer. They told me you were gone. Only in their imagination, I said. Keep your head down, Tom. This will be over soon. He looked toward the kitchen windows. They boxed up your tea set. Said it was fragile and had to be stored. Stored where? In Chloe's car, he said. She and Mr. Daniel left an hour ago. Papers in a leather folder. They were laughing. I thanked him and walked to the detached garage. The air held a metallic bite, the smell of tools and cut wire. The padlock on the maintenance closet was broken. Inside, shelves were empty, except for a small black device with a blinking green eye. I picked it up. A Wi-Fi camera. They had installed surveillance to watch me, or perhaps to make sure I did not return. Old wolves do not mind the moonlight, I told the device. We move in it. I tucked the camera into my bag, crossed the garden, and slipped through the mudroom door with the key hidden under the stone frog I bought at a roadside market in 1972. The kitchen still warmed the air with the last roast they had made. 2 wine glasses on the counter, a red ring at the bottom of each like a secret pact. On the island lay a stack of documents edged in gold. I skimmed the top page. Inventory lists. Appraisals. A photograph of the antique clock from the library with a price written in Chloe's hand. They were selling my life in pieces. I heard footsteps overhead and froze. The rhythm was familiar. Not Daniel. Not Chloe. Lighter steps. A woman. I moved silently down the corridor and slipped into the pantry, breathing through the lavender sachet I kept there since the year my husband died. The footsteps paused above me, then passed to the west wing. The maid, perhaps, hired them. Or one of Chloe's friends. I did not care to know. I had come for one thing. In the study, the afternoon light fell in bright squares across the desk where my husband once wrote letters with a fountain pen. Chloe had placed her laptop there like a conqueror's flag. I opened it. The password was a child's vanity, Chloe 1998. I smiled without joy. Her desktop glowed with folders. Estate sale. Transfer docs. Grandma Medical. I clicked the last one. Inside were scanned files of doctors' notes, copied signatures, and a letter on clinic letterhead stating that I showed signs of diminished capacity. The letter was dated 3 months earlier. There was a scanned signature from a doctor I had never met. I whispered, "So this is how far you went." The floorboard in the hall creaked. I shut the lid and slid behind the velvet curtain by the window. The study door pushed open. Heels ticked against the floor. A young woman's voice said, "Hello? Is anyone here?" The heels paused by the desk. A fingernail tapped the laptop. Papers rustled. Then the door closed again. I waited another minute before I exhaled and emerged. Time to retrieve the first part of my trail. Beneath the rug near the bookshelf, there was a crack in the floorboard my husband never repaired because he said he liked this house to have a heartbeat. I pried it up with the tip of a brass letter opener. The space beneath held an envelope sealed with red wax. Inside were copies of documents I had prepared with Mr. Hale. The mirror will, the no contest clause, and a notarized statement that any surveillance installed without my express permission would be considered evidence of coercion. There were also photographs of Chloe guiding my hand on a pen during one of their document sessions, taken from a camera set behind a porcelain swan on the mantel. I had placed it there weeks earlier, the day I heard their whisper in the kitchen. Old wolves do not mind the moonlight, but we do enjoy a clear view of the valley. I returned the floorboard, slipped the envelope into my bag, and moved toward the library. The grandfather clock stood solemn and huge, ticking like a judge clearing his throat. I opened the glass case, wound the key twice, and then pressed my fingers against the false back my husband had built during the war. Behind it rested a leather journal and a small flash drive taped to the wood. I pocketed both. As I turned, the library door swung open. Daniel filled the frame, his tie loosened, his smile careful. "Mother," he said pleasantly. "You came back." "I never left," I replied. He stepped into the room. "You should have called. We changed the locks for your safety." "Of course," I said. Nothing says safety like being locked out of one's own home. He glanced at my bag. "What have you taken?" "Memories," I said. "They are light to carry." His jaw tightened. "Let us not be dramatic. The estate is under control. You will have a generous allowance. Chloe is arranging everything." "Chloe is arranging my funeral in monthly installments," I said. "Tell me, did she forge the clinic letterhead herself, or did she outsource that too?" He blinked, then laughed too quickly. "You always had a dark sense of humor." "I had a husband with a brilliant sense of caution," I said, and I nodded toward the clock. "He left me little compartments everywhere. I am very difficult to erase, Daniel. You should have remembered that before you chose a daughter over your mother." His voice lowered. "We chose the future." "Whose future?" I asked. "Yours or the one that bears my name?" He spread his hands. "Mother, none of this is personal. Greed is always personal." He moved closer, and for a moment I saw the boy who once cried because a robin fell from a nest. That boy had hardened into a man who sold anything he could bear to name value. He reached for my bag. I stepped back. "Do not touch me." We stared at each other. Then he smiled in that tired way people smile when they think they have already won. "You cannot stop us, Mother. The papers are signed. The bank recognizes me. The staff recognizes me. Chloe has documented everything. The law is on our side." I let the silence stretch, then I said, "The law is a river. You placed your boat in it. You did not check the current." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and paled. "What is this?" I knew without seeing. The flash drive from the clock had already begun its work. I had set it to upload to Mr. Hale the moment it connected to any computer. But there was another trick. The moment I entered the study earlier, I slid the drive into Chloe's laptop. A timed script sent copies of all her files to Mr. Hale's secure cloud, along with the surveillance footage from my porcelain swan. "Daniel," I asked softly, "do you remember what your father used to say when storms came?" He did not answer. He said, batten down early because Rain has a cruel memory. His phone kept buzzing. He looked at me with confusion that bordered on fear. What did you do? I prepared for Rain. He pocketed the phone and tried to calm down. We will talk about this tonight. Chloe is bringing the notary over. We will finalize the living trust. After that, you can rest. I nodded as if soothed. Yes. Let us finalize everything tonight. He relaxed, relieved by my compliance. He did not see the old diary in my hand, the one that contained my husband's notes about the estate's original land grant, the covenant that prohibited a sale without the founder's widow's consent. It had been forgotten for years, buried under stories of winters and harvests. I had not forgotten. I will never forget the bones of a house. Daniel left the room. I heard him tell someone in the hallway. She is calm now. Calm sounded like a victory if you were deaf to the sound of water rising. I opened the diary and slid a thin piece of vellum into my bag. My husband had placed it there himself with a scrawl. If someone ever treats you like furniture, pull this nail. It was the covenant document, dry and delicate, but powerful as a thunderclap. Any transfer attempted without the widow's free and present consent became void, and any beneficiary who sought to manipulate that consent would be disinherited in favor of a charitable trust named at the widow's discretion. He had written that line 35 years ago. He had never shown it to anyone, not even Daniel. He suspected the world would get hungry. I closed the diary and breathed. Somewhere in the house, a door opened and voices rose. Chloe had arrived. Laughter slid along the hallway like oil. I stepped into the corridor and followed the sound. The drawing room glittered with evening light. Chloe stood by the mantel, a leather folder in her arms, her lips bright as a cut pomegranate. "Grandma," she said warmly. "There you are. We have a very simple document for you. No fuss. No worries. Just a signature, and we will make sure you never have to think about business again." I looked from her to Daniel, from Daniel to the folder. "I will sign," I said. "But first we will play a game." Chloe tilted her head. "A game?" "Yes," I said. "It is called Truth and Consequence. I will ask 3 questions. You will answer honestly. If you lie once, the consequence begins." She laughed. "This is childish." "It is the law," I said. "Shall we begin?" What 3 questions could break Chloe's confidence and set off the trap I had built one careful layer at a time. Chloe set her folder on the table and crossed her arms. "3 questions," she said, half laughing. "All right, Grandma. Let's have your little quiz." Daniel looked wary, but he said nothing. His hand rested on the arm of the chair, tapping a rhythm I remembered from his childhood. The same rhythm he used when trying to hide guilt. I smiled. "Good. Let's begin. Question 1. Chloe," I said, "when did you stop believing in honesty?" Her laughter faltered. "What kind of question is that?" "A very old one," I said. "Because I remember you once cried when you broke a window and told me the truth before I even asked. You said, 'I want to be honest like Grandpa.' Do you remember that?" She looked away. "People change." "No," I said softly. "Only masks change. Faces beneath them stay the same." Daniel sighed. "Mother, please." I held up a hand. "Second question. Question 2. Did you or did you not bring a doctor's statement declaring me unfit to handle my affairs?" Silence. Then Chloe shifted her weight. "You were forgetful, Grandma. We were protecting you." I nodded slowly. "By forging a medical document?" Daniel's eyes flickered. "No one forged anything." I tilted my head. "Then you will not mind that I had the letter verified. The clinic has no record of it. The doctor whose signature appears there left 5 years ago." Chloe's face lost its color. You had it checked?" "Oh, I had everything checked," I said. "You should never underestimate a woman who has spent a lifetime balancing books and memories." Daniel stood abruptly. "Enough of this. Let's get this over with." He turned toward the notary standing quietly in the corner, a young man I had not noticed before. His nervous fingers shuffled through the papers. But I wasn't done yet. Question 3. "Before you ask me to sign anything," I said, "do you swear that no part of this document was drafted to alter my original will?" Chloe's tone sharpened. "Of course. It's just a standard update." "Then read the 3rd clause aloud," I said. She hesitated. "There's no need for drama." "Read it," I repeated. Her eyes dropped to the paper, scanning quickly, until they froze. Her lips parted. What is this?" Daniel leaned over. "What's wrong?" She pointed at the paragraph, pale as paper. "It says any transfer will take effect immediately upon signature, including property titles and bank holdings." Daniel's face drained. "That's not what did you plan?" I finished for him. No, it isn't. You see, I had Mr. Hale prepare 2 sets of documents. One that looked like yours, and one that replaced them entirely. Guess which one you're holding? The notary blinked in confusion. Ma'am, I was told. I smiled gently. You were told you were witnessing an estate amendment. In truth, you're witnessing its revocation. Daniel's hands clenched. You tricked us. No, I said calmly. I mirrored you. The room seemed to shrink. The air thickened with panic. Chloe backed away from the table. This isn't legal. You can't just... I can, I said. And I did. Mr. Hale filed a new will the day before you had me sign your fraudulent papers. Every copy, every clause, every letter you changed was anticipated. I opened my bag and placed a small flash drive on the table. This, I said, contains every recording, every forged signature, and every email you sent about managing the old woman's property. It is already in the hands of the authorities. But I wanted to give you both the chance to face me before the world does. Daniel's voice cracked. Mother, please think about the family name. I looked him straight in the eyes. I am. That is why I am cleansing it. Chloe took a step forward. You're bluffing. I turned the flash drive in my fingers. Am I? She lunged for it, but before she could touch it, the notary spoke up. Miss Carter, I've just received a message from my office. It says there's an injunction on the estate. From a Mr. Hale. He claims to represent Mrs. Carter, and has filed a protective order against transfer. Chloe's hand fell. No, I nodded. The river changed its current. Outside, thunder rolled. Rain streaked the windows. I watched it fall, each drop a quiet punctuation on years of trust broken. Daniel whispered, What have you done, Mother? What I should have done years ago, I said. Protected the home your father built. Later that night, after they stormed out, I sat by the fire with a cup of tea. I could hear Chloe's voice echoing from the drive. You can't stop us. You're old, weak, finished. But she didn't know about the final layer. She didn't know that the mirror would contain a clause so precise, so invisible, it would undo everything they tried to steal. Because while they had taken the estate in name, they had no idea that the name itself, Maple Bridge, carried a covenant that made their claim worthless. The law would soon reveal it, and I would be there watching when the truth came for them. What happens when Chloe and Daniel try to sell the estate? Only to discover the hidden legal trap buried in the mirror will itself. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain drumming on the roof, steady, relentless, like justice knocking at the door. I poured myself tea and watched the storm slide down the windows of my small rented cottage at the edge of town. It was not Maple Bridge Manor, but peace lives in truth, not in walls. At 8 sharp, Mr. Hale arrived, umbrella dripping. He carried a thick folder under his arm. It has begun, he said simply. I nodded. They are selling it, aren't they? He handed me the folder. Chloe and Daniel signed a preliminary agreement with the developer. The buyer intends to convert Maple Bridge into a luxury spa resort. But they will hit a wall the moment they attempt to file the deed transfer. I smiled faintly. The covenant? Exactly, he said. Your husband was clever. The clause binds ownership to the founder's widow until her death, and only if she consents in writing at the time of sale. Any sale without that consent voids the entire transfer and reverts the property to the charitable trust named in the mirror will. Then they will destroy themselves, I murmured. Once they push the transaction through, yes, he replied. But be ready, Evelyn. They will fight. They'll call you names, make you out to be senile or vindictive. I lifted my chin. Let them. I've been called worse by smaller people. That afternoon, the storm cleared. I drove to the manor, not to reclaim it, but to witness the spectacle. The grand driveway that once echoed with laughter now roared with unfamiliar engines. Expensive cars lined the gravel path. A for sale banner fluttered across the iron gate. I parked outside and walked in, cane tapping against the stones. Chloe spotted me first. Her face froze. Grandma? You can't be here. This is private business. Private, I said, glancing at the banner. What a curious word to hang on a public lie. Daniel appeared beside her, his face flushed. Mother, you're making a scene. Go home. This isn't the time. Oh, but it is, I said. I hear you are selling Maple Bridge. Congratulations. A man in a tailored suit approached, the developer, no doubt. Ah, Mrs. Carter. Delighted to meet you. I understand you've approved the sale. I smiled. That depends on which Evelyn Carter you mean. The one they erased, or the one whose name is still legally bound to the land. The developer blinked. I don't follow. You will, I said. Check the deed records before you sign anything. Daniel stepped between us. Ignore her. She's confused. Confused, I repeated softly. Is that what the world calls awareness these days? The notary from before was there too, pale and sweating. Mrs. Carter, he said quietly. I received notice from the court this morning. There's an active injunction on the property. No transfers can proceed. The developer's face hardened. What injunction? I turned to him. The one that protects widows from vultures. Chloe's composure snapped. You can't stop us. You're just delaying the inevitable. Perhaps, I said, stepping closer. But tell me, Chloe, when you look at this house, do you see a home or just a price tag? She hesitated, then spat. A fortune you don't deserve to waste. I nodded slowly. Thank you. That's the answer I needed. Mr. Hale appeared then, holding a folder. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, Mrs. Carter has authorized me to present her updated will. I recommend you all listen before proceeding. Daniel sneered. Updated? You mean fabricated? Hale ignored him. The document includes a no-contest clause. If any heir challenges her decisions in court, they forfeit all inheritance immediately. The estate then transfers fully to the Maplebridge Children's Trust. The developer turned to Chloe and Daniel, frowning. I think our deal is over. Chloe's voice rose, trembling now. You can't do this. Oh, but I already did, I said quietly. The papers were filed weeks before your betrayal. The sky darkened again, thunder rolling far away. Leave now, I told them. Go while you still have your dignity. The rest you've already sold. The following morning, Evelyn receives a summons. Chloe and Daniel are taking her to court. The stage is set for a final public reckoning where the mirror's true power will be revealed. When the court summons arrived, it smelled faintly of fresh ink and arrogance. The envelope was thick, embossed, expensive, a perfect reflection of my family's greed. They were suing me for fraudulent interference with inheritance. I laughed when I read it. Not a bitter laugh, a knowing one. Because every page, every accusation, only proved one thing. I had struck where it hurt most. Mr. Hale sat across from me in his office, reading the documents carefully. They're going all in, he said. Chloe's filed an affidavit claiming you manipulated the will while mentally unfit. They're pushing for a full competency hearing. How predictable, I said, stirring sugar into my tea. A wolf bites, then cries self-defense. He smiled faintly. Are you ready for this, Evelyn? It will get ugly. Justice often is, I replied. But I've faced childbirth, war shortages, and loneliness. A courtroom is just another kind of weather. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, gray skies, the kind that make the world feel paused. I walked in wearing my late husband's favorite brooch, a tiny silver maple leaf. A reminder of roots. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Chloe sat beside Daniel, immaculate in a cream suit, her expression carved from ice. Their lawyer, young, sharp, and smug, smiled at me as if I were a prop in his performance. Mrs. Carter, he began when the judge entered, we're here to establish whether you were of sound mind when altering your will. My clients, your son and granddaughter, have grave concerns that you were manipulated or coerced. Grave concerns, I repeated softly. They should. They dug their own. The judge's eyebrows twitched, amusement perhaps. The lawyer pressed on. Mrs. Carter, did you or did you not sign over financial control to your son last year? I did, I said. Under the impression it was temporary management. I later discovered deceit. And when you changed your will, were you aware of its contents? More than anyone in this room, I said evenly. I wrote most of it myself. He smirked. That's a bold claim for someone your age. Do you often recall fine details? I leaned forward. Do you often underestimate people who could be your grandmother? The courtroom chuckled. Chloe's jaw tightened. He tried to corner me with documents, showing signatures and dates, claiming inconsistencies. What he didn't expect was that every page he presented, every forged paper they used to frame me, had already been authenticated by Mr. Hale and cross-referenced with the originals sealed in the bank's safe. When he finished, I asked the judge if I could speak. Mrs. Carter, she said kindly, you may. I stood, hand steady on my cane. Your Honor, I've lived long enough to see greed wear many masks. My granddaughter calls it ambition. My son calls it protection. But what they did was theft, wrapped in affection. I glanced toward Chloe. She once told me I couldn't stop them from taking the estate. She was right, I couldn't stop them from trying. But I could prepare for it. Mr. Hale rose and held up a small black drive. This, he said, contained surveillance footage, signed affidavits, and digital records of communications between Miss Chloe Carter and her father, detailing their plan to transfer Mrs. Carter's assets using forged documents and a falsified medical statement. Chloe stood up. That's illegal. You can't. Oh, it's quite legal, Mr. Hale said coolly. Your grandmother owned the home where the footage was captured. Consent was not required for the owner to monitor her own property. The judge leaned forward. Play the footage. The courtroom dimmed as the screen lit up. There, in grainy clarity, Chloe's voice filled the room. She'll never know what she's signing, she said, smiling. Once it's filed, she's done. The estate's ours. Daniel's voice followed, softer, nervous. She'll find out eventually. Chloe laughed. By then, she'll be in some retirement home. She won't even remember. The room went utterly still. Chloe's lawyer stammered something about out-of-context remarks, but the damage was done. The judge's eyes were cold now. I could have stopped there. But justice, like a symphony, deserves its crescendo. Your Honor, I said. That was the first act. May I present the second? The clerk nodded. Mr. Hale placed a printed document on the table. This is the original Maplebridge Covenant, signed in 1958 by the founder, Mr. Charles Carter. The judge scanned it. And this document states that no sale, transfer, or reassignment of Maplebridge Manor may occur without the living widow's written consent. Violation of this clause results in automatic forfeiture of ownership rights, transferring full authority to the Maplebridge Children's Trust. The opposing lawyer frowned. That clause is obsolete. On the contrary, Mr. Hale said, it was reaffirmed by the county registry every decade. The last reaffirmation was filed by Mrs. Carter herself 2 years ago. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge turned to Chloe and Daniel. Did either of you verify this covenant before attempting to sell the estate? Neither spoke. I see, the judge said quietly. Then you've not only committed fraud but attempted to profit from it. Chloe's composure shattered. You can't do this, Grandma. You tricked us. You turned everyone against us. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for a moment, I saw the little girl with pigtails sitting at my feet, begging for stories. That girl was gone. I didn't turn anyone against you, Chloe, I said softly. You did that yourself. She trembled. You're going to ruin us. No, I said. You ruined yourselves the moment you replaced love with greed. The judge cleared her throat. Given the evidence, the court rules the contested documents invalid. Mrs. Carter's mental competence is hereby affirmed. The fraudulent power of attorney and property transfer are void. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for investigation into elder exploitation and forgery. Daniel sagged in his chair. Chloe's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse but of defeat. I turned to them. You wanted the estate. Now it belongs to charity. Every penny. Maplebridge will never belong to the greedy again. Chloe whispered, You hate us. No, I said. I pity you. Because you could have had something far more valuable, a family's love. As the gavel struck, the courtroom erupted. Reporters swarmed, flashbulbs popped, and Chloe fled in tears. Daniel didn't move. He sat staring at the floor, face pale, hands shaking. When the judge left, I approached him quietly. You were my son once, I said. I hope someday you remember what that means. He looked up at me with eyes filled with something between shame and longing. But I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out of that courtroom into the sunlight, not as a victim, but as a survivor of bloodlines and betrayal. Justice has been served in court, but Evelyn still must face the emotional wreckage left behind. The public fallout, the media storm, and the final decision about Maplebridge Manor's fate. The day after the ruling, Maplebridge Manor no longer belonged to the Carter family. It belonged to justice. News spread faster than wildfire. The story of an elderly widow outsmarting her greedy heirs made headlines across the county. Reporters camped outside my little cottage, their cameras flashing like fireflies in the morning sun. Mrs. Carter, how did you know your family was plotting against you? Do you have a message for other seniors facing financial exploitation? I answered only one question, quietly but firmly. Never confuse age with helplessness. By evening, my story had become a sensation. The Mirror will, grandmother's genius revenge. I sat by the window, tea steaming in my hands, as the television murmured my name. It should have felt triumphant. It didn't, because beneath victory's glow was an ache, the ache of what love used to be. A week later, Mr. Hale visited again, holding a small stack of papers. Everything is finalized, he said. The Maplebridge Children's Trust now owns the estate. The proceeds from any future operations, tours, events, rentals, will go directly to fund education and housing for orphaned children. I smiled softly. Good. Maple Bridge deserves laughter again, even if it isn't mine. He hesitated. There's something else. Daniel requested to see you. Privately. My stomach tightened. And Chloe? She's gone. Left for the city. Changed her number. The investigation continues, but I think she's running from her reflection. I nodded. Very well. Tell Daniel to come tomorrow morning. The next day, the doorbell rang precisely at 9. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, thinner, older somehow, his arrogance stripped away. He looked like a man carrying the weight of his own mistakes. Mother, he said quietly. May I come in? I stepped aside. You may. He sat at my small kitchen table, eyes darting between the chipped mugs and the smell of lavender tea. You've made your point, he said finally. You won. I suppose congratulations are in order. This wasn't a game, I said softly. You didn't lose to me, Daniel. You lost yourself. He sighed, rubbing his temples. You think I wanted this? I thought I was securing something for the family. Chloe pushed me. She said it was what any smart man would do. And you believed her? She's my daughter. She's your mirror, I corrected. You raised her to value wealth over warmth. She simply perfected your lesson. He winced, and for a moment I saw the little boy again, knees scraped, eyes full of apologies he didn't know how to say. I don't expect forgiveness, he whispered. But I came to tell you, I'm selling everything I have to pay back the legal fees and damages. I'll have nothing left. Then perhaps, I said, you'll finally understand what enough means. He looked at me then, tears gathering but refusing to fall. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No, Daniel. I grieved for you. That's worse than hate. We sat in silence for a long while, the clock ticking between us like an old friend keeping score. When he stood to leave, I handed him a small envelope. Take this, I said. He frowned. What is it? A deed, I said. Not to Maple Bridge, that chapter is closed. It's a small cottage near the river. Your father bought it decades ago and left it in a trust one never touched. You'll find work there, perhaps peace too. He stared at me, stunned. After everything I did. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, I said. It's simply refusing to let bitterness write